Entrepreneurs are obsessed with three little letters, ROI, return on investment. And it makes sense because if you don't get a return on your investment, then you don't have a business. But ROI can actually be a very dangerous way to set about making your business decisions. And in this video, I'm going to tell you exactly why that is. So to explain the dangers of ROI, I'm going to tell you about 3 different growth projects that I've made mistakes on over the years in my main business, Story Learning, and what you can learn from them. And the first is a YouTube channel that I began back in 2017, 2018. It was around the time when YouTube was really starting to pop off. I had a lot of friends and colleagues who were making really good money with YouTube. And I had decided to start a new kind of niche YouTube channel in the industry that I was in, which is language learning. I planned out the channel, I got the people in place, and I started it. And it was really fun, and people really enjoyed the videos that we were making. Now, after about 6 to 9 months or so, we looked back at the stats and we saw that, we spent a lot of money, but we haven't really grown that much. We had maybe 3,000, 4,000 subscribers, and we've been spending a bunch of money, hadn't made much money back on the back end at all. And I looked at it and I thought, you know what? We don't have ROI here. We are losing money. And I decided to pull the plug. So I canned the entire YouTube channel. Now, the funny thing was that 3 or 4 years later, when we decided to rekindle this idea, we went back to that same channel, which we'd left up, hadn't taken it down, it was still there. And we saw that, hang on a minute, we've got 10,000 subscribers on this YouTube channel. And it turns out that time had done so much of the work because those videos had kept on pumping during that time. And that's often the case with YouTube. The growth comes later. It takes a long time to come, but when it does, it's a really serious hockey stick. So all we needed to do actually was give enough time for the work to happen. What we did is we looked at ROI at a point in time that was a little bit too early. Now, the second example would be when we were first experimenting with paid ads. So we were running traffic to Facebook, Instagram ads, and our funnels were fairly typical. We had, lead magnet and then an offer and an email sequence on the back end. And we tried so hard to get to break even with these funnels. We had all these different ads, these different lead magnets. We had to cycle through all these different offers. But what would happen was that every time we sat down with our ads people to look at the numbers, they'd say, look, Ollie, based on what you're able to bring in any 14-day or 30-day period, we can really only afford to spend like $1.50 per lead or something like that. And so we can't scale. And so we were never able to scale our ad spend because we couldn't track more than a certain amount of revenue during any given month. We were looking at it month by month by month. And so we ended up kind of canning it and then, restarting it, a few odd experiments, but they all were all doomed to failure because of those economics. Now, many years later, we had another crack at running paid ads, except I was a bit older and wiser this time, and I knew a little bit more about data. And so when we actually came to do these calculations, I wasn't so quick to judge our ROI based on that 30-day period. And I looked at the data and I found something interesting, which was that if we looked at that data through a 45-day lens rather than 30, suddenly the picture was a little bit different. We had a higher return than we did during that 1 month period. When we extended that time horizon beyond 45 days, the ROI was different again, and it painted a different picture about when the money was coming back, which gave us the intelligence we needed to start adapting our funnels to fit more into buyer behavior. So the point was, by viewing it all through the lens of one defined time period, that was the difference between it working or not. Now, the third example is when we first got into influencer marketing in a big way. I went all in. I hired a full-time influencer marketer. We spent tens of thousands on sponsoring different influencers as part of our growth strategy. And about 6 months in, we looked at the data and it started to feel a lot like Groundhog Day again. So we looked at the data and we saw, we've spent 6 figures in salary and sponsorships, and we've lost a whole bunch of money. We're not even close to making this money back. But rather than pull the plug, which I'd done so many times before, I went to speak to a mentor of mine and I asked him, what's wrong with my mindset here? How should I be thinking about this? And he said to me, for an initiative as big as this, you need to be thinking in terms of R&D, research and development, not ROI. Because if instead of demanding to see an ROI now, which is kind of arrogant expectation in a way, if you can put that money into learning and figuring out how to improve the economics, how to get better results from this, then you're going to end up with something much more sustainable. And so I didn't pull the plug, I kept it going. And then after about 9 months, not only had we reached break even with our influencer marketing, but we were actually making 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5x multiples on our ad spend. And it was all because I extended the time horizon. So what is the moral of these 3 stories? Well, with each of these 3 things, it was insisting on viewing ROI in a very simple time period. That was the problem. With YouTube, all I needed to do was just give it time to breathe, give it time to grow. And that would have been enough to eventually see the economics that we needed. With the paid ads, why the need to look at it in a 30-day time period? Well, that's just because that's how most agencies bill, 30 days. But actually those 30 days are meaningless. They don't speak to the behavior or the dynamics of your customers at all. So by looking beyond that time period, that's where all the money was. Similarly with influencer marketing, what we really needed to do was just, rather than say, right, we have to make our money back in 6 months, it's like, well, how can we learn the lessons we need to learn over the course of a year so that we have a very long-term, profitable, sustainable growth vehicle after that? And so with ROI, whenever I talk about this now, I add an extra little letter onto the end, which is ROIT, ROI over a specific time period, because the time period that you use to look at your return on any investment is going to give you a completely different answer. And you can see that clearly with those 3 examples that I gave you. You know, it reminds me a lot of that wonderful book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. Business is hard. You're not supposed to just be able to snap your fingers and make money. Things are difficult. Problems need to be figured out. And there is an incredible arrogance around thinking that if I'm trying something new like Facebook ads and I can't get it to work, then it's Facebook that's the problem, or it's YouTube that's the problem. Well, what if you're the problem? What if you just haven't figured it out yet? What if your execution was crappy? What if you have not got the skill set yet to execute on this properly? That is actually far more likely. It was certainly the case for me with all of these different experiments, and every time I pulled the plug prematurely. I was immature as an entrepreneur in the way that I was going about focusing on all these things, and it was all because I insisted on having an ROI right at the beginning, and I didn't want to lose money. Well, sometimes you've got to lose money, and being willing to lose money but looking at it over a longer period of time is what can grow your business massively over the years. It's a little bit like deciding to have a child, and when you first had the kid, you're in love with the kid and it's your pride and joy. 2 years later, the kid hits the terrible twos. They run around breaking everything, making a bunch of noise, you can't sleep, and they haven't got a job yet. And you're thinking, well, what the hell's going on? Whereas in reality, it's just the time period that you're looking at it with that is all wrong. What you really need to do is just give the kid a little bit more time to grow up and also work on yourself so that you can support the kid through that transition. So remember, return on investment is what you make of it. It can look very different depending on the lens that you choose to look at it with. And this, I think, is where entrepreneurial maturity comes into play. But of course, making investment decisions, knowing what to invest in, when to invest in, how much to invest, and for how long is one of the most difficult business skills of all. And if you'd like to hear my complete framework for exactly how I go about doing this, there's a video right over here that would explain the whole thing.